Um, Good morning, everyone, especially to you, sir. I am the reporter of Lesson 8. Sir, kaning sa computer lang ko nagamit, sir. Nya, walay camera diri, sir. Ang naa is mic lang po. So, pattern interpretation. Fingerprint patterns. No two fingerprint patterns of different fingers are ever identical. Everyone in the world might be fingerprinted, but no two points of different fingers in this vast vary would ever be alike in all the details. Many million of these prints would be similar, but critical examination would show numerous differences. The search for the fingerprint of a person is not done under the individual's name, but through fingerprint formula or classification. So, in short, fingerprints are unique to each person. Even if everyone in the world were fingerprinted, no two fingerprints from different fingers would be exactly the same. While many prints might look similar, if we look closely, we find differences. When searching for someone's fingerprint, we don't look for their name. Instead, we use a fingerprint formula or classification system to identify them. Fingerprint patterns are given certain names. The naming of a particular pattern is known as pattern interpretation. After all, the patterns in any certain set of prints have been given their individual names. A classification is assigned to the entire set of prints. Pattern interpretation refers to naming one fingerprint pattern, while classification generally refers to the formula derived for a complete set of 10 fingerprints pattern. There are three general groups of pattern, each group bearing the same general characteristics. These are arches, loops, whirl. So here it is a arch, the loops, and the whirl. So fingerprint patterns are named based on certain characteristics, which is called pattern interpretation. Each type of fingerprint pattern has its own name. As I said, there are three main groups of pattern: the arch, loops, and whirls. These groups have similar characteristics within them. So when we talk about pattern interpretation, we're essentially naming these different types of fingerprints, which helps in identifying them. Next. So the pattern in each major groups may be further divided into subgroups. The arches, loops, whirls. In arches, we have plain arch, tented arch. In loops, we have radial loop and ulnar loop. In whirls, we have plain whirl, central pocket loop whirl, double loop whirl, and accidental whirl. So if plain arcs look like this, tented arcs look like this, followed by ulnar radial, plain whirl, central pocket loop, double loop whirl, accidental whirl. So definition of terms. Excuse me. Before pattern interpretation can be properly understood, it is necessary to understand the meaning of a few technical terms used in fingerprint work. Recurving ridge. A recurving ridge is a ridge that curves back in the direction from which it started. Shows a recurving ridge. The curve at the top or close end is the curve. Notice that it is rounded, that it turns back gradually, that it has no angles. So, recurving ridge. Recurving ridge looks like this. It is a ridge on a fingerprint that curves back in the direction from where it began, like this. In other words, it bends back on itself. When you look at it, you'll see that the curve at the top or close end is called the curve. It's rounded, doesn't have any sharp angles, and turns back gradually. These features help experts identify and classify Different types of fingerprints. Converging ridges. Converging ridges are ridges that meet at one point forming into another single or merge abutting a front wait ridge are ridges that meet at one point forming an angle. A single ridge cannot form an angle. Angles are formed by one ridge abutting or running into another. Angles are formed by one and is point of core converging and angular. Example of the closed end is point of convergence. It is pointed and angular, not rounded as a curve. Sometimes there are two or more convergences when several ridges run into each other and all form angles. Recurving ridge and converging ridges are of vital significance in fingerprint work, so that it is important to tell them apart. Often what appears as a screw cannot be accepted as a recurve because it is ruined by another ridge, usually shorter one which run into it forming a right angle. This is said to spoil the recurve and such a ridge structure would not be considered as a true recurving ridge. The short ridge runs into the top or summit of the curve at a right angle. This short ridge formation which runs into the one trying to recurve is called appendage. So converging ridge occurs when multiple ridges meet at a single point and merge into another single area. This ridge forms angles at the point of convergence. An example of converging ridges is when several ridges intersect and create angles. The close end of the angle shows two or more converging ridges coming together. So this is what converging ridges looks like. So now let's go into diverging ridges. Diverging ridges are merely two ridges running side by side and suddenly separating, one going one way and other going another way. In other words, a divergence is the spreading apart of two ridges which have been running parallel or nearly parallel shows diverging ridges. In it, they run parallel and suddenly separate. One of them thumbs upward while the other turns downward. So, what the other way, the one way and the other going another way, like this. So, diverging ridges occur when two ridges have been running alongside each other suddenly separate. So they are suddenly separate. With one ridge going one way and the other ridge is going another way. Essentially, it's the spreading apart of two ridges that were previously running parallel or nearly parallel to each other. You can see an example of diverging ridges where they start off parallel and then one ridge turns upward, while the other turns downward. So, bifurcating ridge. Bifurcating ridge is the forking or splitting of one ridge into two or more ridges. However, instead of two ridges running parallel, there is just one ridge which forks or splits into two ridges. This is not a divergence, it is called a bifurcation. One half of the bifurcation sometimes runs in an entirely different direction from the other half. Other times, the two legs of the bifurcation may run along almost parallel as they do. So, bifurcating ridges It refers to the splitting of one ridge into two or more ridges, unlike diverging ridges, where the ridges separate from each other. In a bifurcating, in a bifurcation, there's only one ridge that forks or splits into two ridges. These two ridges might run parallel in different direction. It's crucial to distinguish between bifurcation and diverging ridges because they represent different patterns in fingerprint analysis. So this is what bifurcating ridge looks like. So here, this bifurcation. This is what bifurcation ridge looks like. So let's go back to the PowerPoint. Type lines are two innermost ridges which start parallel, diverge, and surround or tend to surround the pattern area. Type lines are the basic boundaries of most fingerprints. They are formed by ridges which run parallel, starting from the lower corner or corners of the pattern and flowing inward and upward toward the edge of the pattern area, where they diverge or separate, them surrounded or tend to surround the pattern area. Everything that is required to interpret a pattern will be found inside these type lines. So, this is the type line. Um, Type lines are the two innermost spot ridges in a fingerprint pattern. They do begin parallel to each other, then diverge and encircle or tend to encircle the pattern area. So these are the pattern area. They they begin parallel to each other, then diverge and encircle, not completely encircle, but they tend to encircle the pattern area. So these lines create the basic boundaries of most fingerprints. They are made up of ridges that start from the lower corner of the pattern, flows inward and upwards towards the pattern area's edge, and then separate or diverge. Everything is needed to interpret a fingerprint pattern is contained within these type lines. They provide the framework for understanding the unique characteristics of each fingerprint. So, pattern area. The pattern area of a fingerprint is that part which lies within the area surrounded by the type lines. In other words, it is that part of fingerprint in which are found the cores, deltas, and other ridges pertaining to a particular pattern. It is the area inside the type lines and only part of a fingerprint which is importance in regard to interpretation and classification. It is present in all patterns, but in many arches and dented arches, it is impossible to define. This is not important. However, as the only patterns in which there is need to define the pattern area for classification are loops and whorls. So the pattern area here, it is the part enclosed by the type lines. So these are the type lines where you find the cores, deltas, and other ridges specific to the pattern. Is crucial for interpretation and classification because it contains unique features used for identification. While present in all patterns, it's often hard to define in arches and tended arch, but this is not crucial because only loops and whorls patterns are required a defined pattern area for classification. So, as I said earlier, only patterns in which there is need to define the pattern area for classifications are loops and whorls. So, delta formations. A delta is a point on the first ridge formation found at or directly in front of and nearest the center of the divergence of the type lines. So the word delta is an old Greek word and is the fourth letter of the Greek alphabet. It corresponds to the letter D in our alphabet. The original English meaning of the word refers to a deposit of earth at the mouth of a river. As the river flows downstream, it gradually wears away its banks, carrying the oil away with it. When the river runs into a lake or ocean, its current rapidly decreases and the soil it is carrying sinks to the bottom. So I just trying to get the root word of the word delta. So though it is not part of our discussion, this the soil is carrying sinks to the bottom. So let's proceed now. Delta. Here we can find delta at the point on the ridge formation found at or directly in front of and nearest the center of divergence of the type lines. So these are the type lines and these are the delta. The one that is pointing the arrow, the black arrow, that is a delta. Like the banks of a river, the type lines of a fingerprint run parallel and suddenly diverge when they reach a delta. The ridge formation at or nearest the center of the divergence of the type line is the delta. A delta may be a bifurcation, an abrupt ending ridge, a dot, a short ridge, a meeting of two ridges, a point at the first curving ridge located nearest the center and in front of the divergence of the type lines. So, we have rules on the selection of delta. So, when there is a choice between two or more possible deltas, the following rules govern. Rule number one: the delta may not be located at a bifurcation which does not open toward the pattern area. This rule states that the delta cannot be located at a bifurcation that doesn't open toward the pattern area. In other words, the delta should not be positioned where two ridges split but don't create an opening or flow towards the central area of the fingerprint pattern. This ensures that the delta is accurately chosen based on its relationship to the overall pattern structure. Sorry. Rule number two. When there is a choice between bifurcation and another type of delta, the bifurcation is selected. This rule indicates that when faced with a choice between a bifurcation and another type of delta, the bifurcation is chosen. In other words, if there's bifurcation where one ridge splits into two and another type of delta, such as a ridge ending or an island, the bifurcation takes precedence in being selected as the delta. These rules helps prioritize the selection of deltas based on their significance within the fingerprint pattern. Rule number three: when there are two or more possible deltas which conform to the definition of delta, the one nearest the core is chosen. It sometimes happens that the first ridge in front of the divergence will have more than one bifurcation on it, all of which open towards the pattern area and all of which are in front of the divergence of the type lines. So, and the last rule is rule number four. The delta may not be located in the middle of a ridge running between the type lines towards the core, but at nearer and end only. This rule specifies that the delta should not be positioned in the middle of the ridge running between the type lines towards the core of the fingerprint pattern. Instead, it should be closer to one of the type lines. In other words, the delta should be situated nearer to the edge of the pattern area rather than being centrally located along the ridge. This helps ensure accurate selection of delta based on its proximity to the core and the surrounding pattern area. So we're done in the rules. Let's go now to the core formation. Core formations. The core is the center of the heart of anything and as applied to fingerprint. The core is the approximate center of the pattern. When the core is referred as the center of heart of a pattern or heart of a pattern, it does not it does notate center of the pattern. The core is the center of the heart or the heart of anything, and as applied to the fingerprint. The core is the approximate center of the pattern. When the core is referred as the center of heart or pattern, it does not mean the exact central point of the fingerprint impression because there are numerous ridge details outside of the type lines which are not considered in pattern interpretation. Therefore, the core may be located somewhere in the center or as near the center as possible of the pattern area. So the core in a fingerprint pattern is like the center of or heart of the pattern, but it doesn't necessarily denote the exact center of the pattern. This is because fingerprint impressions often contain many ridges details outside of the type lines, which are not considered in pattern interpretation. Therefore, the core may be positioned somewhere in the center or as close to the center as possible of the pattern area, taking into account the overall ridge flow and structure within the defined pattern boundaries. So, uh, we also have rules on the selection of cores, of core, of core rather. Core location is primarily concerned in loops, but there are instances that the core have to be determined in world type pattern. Cores in loops are formed in variety of ways, but they are always found either on or within the innermost looping or curving ridge. So, rule number one, the core is placed upon or within the innermost sufficient curve. This rule states that the core should be positioned upon or within the innermost sufficient curve. In other words, when selecting the core of a fingerprint pattern, it should be placed at or inside the innermost ridge curve that provides enough space to accommodate it. This ensures that the core is positioned in a logical, consistent manner within the fingerprint pattern, helping to accurately define its structure and characteristics. Rule number two, when the innermost sufficient recurve contains no ending ridge or rod rising as high as the shoulders, the core is placed on the shoulder of the loop farther from the delta. This rule, this rule states that when the innermost sufficient recurve doesn't contain an ending ridge or rod rising as high as the shoulder, we already know the term shoulder. Uh, the core is positioned on the shoulder of the loop that is farther away from the delta. In other words, if there are no ending ridges or rods that rise the height of the shoulders within the innermost sufficient curve, the core is placed on the outer edge of the loop, away from the delta. This helps determine the core's placement when certain features are absent within the innermost curve. So, rule number three, when the innermost sufficient curve contains an uneven number of rods or bars rising as high as the shoulders, the core is placed upon the end of the center whether or not it touches the looping ridge. So, this rule specifies that when the innermost sufficient recurve contains an odd number of, of rods or bars rising as high as the shoulder, the core is positioned at the end of the center rod, regardless of whether it touches the looping ridge or not. In other words, if there are an odd numbers of rods or the bars within the innermost curve that reach the height of the shoulder, the core is placed at the end of the center rod within that curve. Even if it doesn't directly touching the looping ridge, this helps establish consistency in core placement when certain features are present within the innermost curve. And the last rule is rule number 4. When the innermost sufficient recurve contains an even number of rods or bars rising as high as the shoulders, the core is placed upon the end of the farther one of the two center rods. The two rods being treated as though they were connected by a recurving ridge. So this rule specifies that when the innermost sufficient recurve contains an even number of rods or bars rising as high as the shoulder, the core is positioned at the end of the farther one of the two center rods. These two rods are treated as if they were connected by a recurving ridge. In other words, if there are an if there are uneven numbers of rods or bars within the innermost curve that reach the height of the shoulders, the core is placed at the end of the center rod that is farther away from the observer. So it is clear here that the core is placed at the end of the center rod that is farther away from the observer. These rules help establish consistent methods. So that's all. Thank you. Wala po to akong report and answer.